Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Leahy. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. My name is Bono. I'm the co-founder of the One campaign, and I'm just going to jump right into it because I've been told not to filibuster. And as you know, the Irish invented the filibuster. So I'm going to read this because that makes it faster. I've just returned from Africa and the Middle East, where I was lucky to join a Codel led by Senator Graham there. I visited Kenya, Jordan, and then with the team, Turkey and Egypt. This visit revealed one fact and two fictions. The fact is that aid can no longer be seen as charity, a nice thing to do when we can afford it. If there's one thing I would like you to take away from this testimony, it is that aid in 2016 is not charity, it is national security. And when it's structured properly with a hard focus on fighting corruption and improving governance to qualify for that aid, it could be the best bulwark we have against the violent extremism that is gaining traction in the Levant and the Sahel. The two fictions the expedition revealed to me were, number one, that this refugee problem is temporary. The typical crisis that creates refugees lasts 25 years. On our trip, Senator Graham and I heard the term permanent temporary solution thrown around, but without the irony that phrase requires. The second fiction is that it's simply a Middle Eastern problem. Refugees are flowing from all over the world, especially Africa, actually. Of the top 10 countries that are hosting refugees today, 5 of them are African. In Europe, the problem has moved from practical to existential. In 1989, the wall that divided Europe came down, a remarkable moment to live through. Who could imagine in 2016 another set of walls being built up, this time made of mesh and razor wire, but walls nevertheless? Members of the subcommittee, let me soberly suggest to you that the integration of Europe, the very idea of European unity, is at risk here. Europe is America's most important ally since the Second World War. Are we not your most important ally in the fight against violent extremism? This should really matter to you. I know it does. Put simply, as we Europeans have learned, if the Middle East catches fire, the flames jump any border controls. And if Africa fails, Europe cannot succeed. It's not rocket science. It's math. Here are the numbers. By 2050, the African population will have doubled to 2.5 billion, twice that of China. 40% of the world's youth will be African, which personally excites me because I have a sense of who they are and want to be. Of the One campaign's 7 million members, 3 million of them are African. We have a sense of their potential as an engine of growth that can roar. But we also fear that if the young people of Africa are misled and marginalized, their anger could be channeled not to hope, but to hate. A choice is stark. We fast-track our friendship, or we invite new enemies. I know that you in this room believe deeply that freedom is more powerful than fear, that hope is more contagious than hate. And I know you'll agree with me when I say that sometimes hope needs a bit of help. Well, this is one of those times. You see, to defeat bad ideas, you need better ideas. But the good news is we have them. UNHCR have great ideas on how humanitarian support can be done better and provide jobs and hope. They witness how the mood of a camp changes if there's a classroom built for kids. They see the despair in the faces of skilled workers not allowed access to the labor market. But soberly, I have to say to you, the international community, though it means well, is having a lot of meetings about the crisis. And I believe it's issuing a record number of press releases. But what it's not doing is cutting checks. As of last month, as you kind of about to hear, the UN's humanitarian response plans for 2016 had only received 9% of the funding they require. 9%. And grants are handed out annually, which is kind of on a hand-to-mouth basis with no predictability, which makes it impossible for these agencies to plan, which is madness. It's absolute madness. Another idea that I heard that might be of serious interest to this committee is to prioritize the support of the countries along the Sahel and the Levant who are not yet in crisis. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the people I met, especially the military, told us it is critical that these countries not only survive, but that they thrive. Imagine if the chaos that ripped through Syria were to engulf Egypt, or God forbid, Nigeria. These are gigantic countries. This is not melodrama. We now know that people, when running from war, will risk the most treacherous journeys. Doctors, teachers tying their children to their chests as they tie themselves to floating corks and tin cans on the Mediterranean Sea, all for the promise of a better life. When you think of an exodus on that big a scale, you realize that we better have some big ideas to meet the challenge. And we do, and I'm really encouraged to sit here and hear them come from a bipartisan committee. These countries need aid, but it's not just aid. Commerce is urgent here. New trade agreements are critical. Concessional loans from the World Bank are essential. Dr. Jim Kim and the World Bank are really being innovative here. So is Gail Smith, who runs USAID. You should be proud of these people. Anti-corruption campaigners in our own office around the corner in the One campaign will tell you that the reforms necessary to qualify for the loans can be as important as the loans themselves. The Africa Development Bank has been right out in front on this stuff. President Akin Adesina understands that corruption kills more people than AIDS, TB, and malaria combined. So tackling corruption has to be part of this package. In fact, he was also one of the first leaders to call for a modern Marshall Plan as a partnership for progress. So what might that mean? Well, the Marshall Plan, as America knows, was the first time the world witnessed development as security on a grand scale. The Marshall Plan was an idea big enough to meet the moment in history. It was an idea as big as the sacrifice Americans made in the fight for freedom, an idea that showed America could not only win the war, but the peace, as Lindsey Graham keeps reminding us. An idea big enough to change the world. An idea like the idea of America itself. You see, the peaceful Europe that I gratefully grew up in, the one that is so under threat right now, was born of the Marshall Plan. History's greatest example of national generosity as national security, which is what I'm talking about today. And I'm not alone. Trade and development as security. That's what Jim Jones is talking about today, and he's not alone. Senator Graham, not alone when he spoke to the Washington Post yesterday. It's the same thing. Finance Minister of Germany, Mr. Schäuble, not known for his wild pronouncements, has invoked this. King Abdullah of Jordan, the same. Actually, King Abdullah is worth thinking about, because he's a leader who's also a military man. It's not coincidence that he's a military man, because I think, I'm sure, military leaders, at least the great ones, know the cost of failure will ultimately be borne by them, by the men and women they lead into battle and have to face as they come home. This is a new century. These are new threats. This is politically very hard. I hope I understand the challenges. I hope I understand the pressures you face as leaders. But in truth, I probably don't. But I'll tell you what I do understand. I understand that America is not ready to give up on its greatness. And I'm not either. That's what got America to the moon. That's the spirit that brought mankind back to Earth when you signed up to fight the largest health disaster in the history of the world, HIV/AIDS. There were members on this subcommittee who refused to accept that AIDS was a problem that couldn't be solved. And since 2002, we now have nearly 9 million people who owe their lives to the US taxpayer. If you're a US taxpayer, you're an AIDS activist. Think about that. I'm here today to testify to the United States Senate that I have seen the impossible made possible right here in these halls. And we need that leadership again in this moment of great jeopardy. It is who you are. It is your essence and your calling. And when you serve history, you serve the people of America. And when you write history, we all live it. Thank you very much.
There are still some tough fights. It isn't always pretty, the process of democracy. It's often frustrating. You can see that in the election going on back home. But just stop and consider this fact about the American campaign that's taking place right now. You had 2 Cuban Americans in the Republican Party running against the legacy of a black man who was president while arguing that they're the best person to beat the Democratic nominee, who will either be a woman or a Democratic socialist. Who would have believed that back in 1959? That's a measure of our progress as a democracy.
How still we see the light above thy deep and dreamless sleep. The silent stars go by, yet in thy dark streets shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sins and enter in, be born to us.
So a good few minutes.
That's good, all right. All right, hold on a second, I gotta get my game face on. Wait, have you written your book yet?
I have not written my
Okay,
book
that's
yet.
good. Don't write your book until you win another chance. I love this. You guys got the little goggles? The Secret Service cleared this? Are we sure this is not gonna explode? Is he pouring the whole, let's just be, before.
Yes.
I don't want like a story about Steph missed the Oklahoma City game because he burned his hand.
Can we test it?
It's like his fingers melted together and his career is over. Oh man, can you imagine? I'd be like the most unpopular guy in the country. That's a wonderful volcano.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
We did it.
Thanks, guys.
Very, very wealthy people become wealthier, while most people are becoming poorer. In fact, the top 1% of people on this planet now own more wealth than the bottom 99%. That to me is unacceptable, it is unsustainable, it is immoral, and together we have got to change that. And I have been enormously impressed by Pope Francis speaking out and his visionary views about creating a moral economy, an economy that works for all people, not just the people on top. And what he has said over and over again, we cannot allow the market just to do what the market does. That's not acceptable. We have got to ingrain moral principles into our economy. And there is no area where that is clearer than in the area of climate change. The greed of the fossil fuel industry is literally destroying our planet. The scientists are virtually unanimous. Climate change is real and it is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating problems all over this planet. And whether the fossil fuel industry likes it or not, We have got to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And what Pope Francis has told us over and over again is we have the wealth to do that. We have the technology to do that. We have the know-how to do that. But we have got to confront is the greed of people who are so much more concerned about their own billions than the future of the children and the future of our planet. So I am just so excited to be here, so proud to be here with other like-minded people who are trying to do our best to create a moral economy. Jeff Sachs, where's Jeff?
Right there, right here.
Right here. Jeff, come next to me. I want Jeff Sachs.
We can move back a little and keep them a little.
Jeff, why don't you say a few words?
I want to say how thrilled the participants are today at the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences to greet Senator Sanders and hear his very powerful remarks today. All day we've been discussing the enormous crisis of inequality of income, the injustice of the world economy, because we've been reflecting on Centesimus Annus, on its 25th anniversary, where Pope John Paul II warned us of these things. If greed and power is let out of moral control, we lose. Senator Sanders has been making this point again and again, every part of my country and around the world, and I can tell you, because I've been with the participants, how thrilled the many of the leaders of this church and many of the participants from around the world are to welcome Senator Sanders here.
Senator Sanders, did you have a talk just a little bit about why this time away from the U.S. campaign trail is worthwhile for you and what you hope to see accomplished here?
Because I believe that the Pope has played a historical and incredible role in trying to create a new world economy and a new vision for the people of our planet. And what he is saying is that we cannot continue to go forward when so few have so much, and when greed is such a destructive force, not only in the United States, of course, but throughout this world. So I have long been a supporter of the economic vision of Pope Francis. His views on climate change have played a profound role. Let me tell you, I'm a member of the Senate Committee on the Environment. Pope Francis's encyclical has played a profound role in turning many people's minds around about the urgency of the moment in terms of dealing with climate change. So when I received this invitation, yeah, I know it's taking me away from the campaign trail for a day, but when I received this information, it was so moving to me that it was something that I could just simply not refuse to attend.
Do you think he'll help you with the Catholic vote in New York, though?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Here in Havana, we see that same talent in cuentapropistas, cooperatives, and old cars that still run. El cubano inventa del aire.
We have constructed a fairly rigid and vigorous set of criteria for us evaluating the intelligence that we receive about ISIL, where it might be operating, where al-Qaeda is operating. These guidelines involve a whole range of agencies consulting extensively and are then checked, double-checked, triple-checked before kinetic actions are taken. And for the most part, our actions are directed at high-value targets in the countries that you just described, outside of the theater of Iraq and Syria. In some cases, what we're seeing are camps that, after long periods of monitoring, becomes clear are involved in and directing plots that could do the United States harm, or are supporting ISIL activities or al-Qaeda activities elsewhere in the world. So if after a long period of observation we are seeing that, in fact, explosive materials are being loaded onto trucks and individuals are engaging in training in small arms, and there are some of those individuals who are identified as couriers for ISIL or al-Qaeda, then based on those evaluations, a strike will be taken. But what we have been very cautious about is making sure that we are not taking strikes in situations where, for example, we think there's the presence of women or children, or if it is in a normally populated area. And, you know, recently we laid out the criteria by which we're making these decisions. We declassified many elements of this. We are going to be putting forward and trying to institutionalize on a regular basis how we make these evaluations and these analyses. I think, you know, in terms of the broader debate that's taken place, David, I think there's been in the past legitimate criticism that the architecture, the legal architecture around the use of drone strikes or other kinetic strikes wasn't as precise as it should have been, and there's no doubt that civilians were killed that shouldn't have been. I think that over the last several years, we have worked very hard to avoid and prevent those kinds of tragedies from taking place. In situations of war, we have to take responsibility when we're not acting appropriately, or where we've just made mistakes even with the best of intentions. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do. And what I can say with great confidence is that our operating procedures are as rigorous as they have ever been, and that there is a constant evaluation of precisely what we do.
Wee, gorgeous! What's that?
We went to the Coliseum and he got a gladiator.
It's a gladiator?
Lovely place. We had such a nice time.
Did you? Dylan?
Thank you.
You gotta be careful where you're walking around. Just throw a Coliseum.
Why?
Well, this is one of the biggest, most beautiful buildings in the whole world. Okay? You see that nice statue over there? See that?
As we know, you stayed last night at the papal residence, so did you meet with Pope Francis?
We did. We had the opportunity to meet with him this morning. He is on his way to Greece now, but we did have the opportunity to chat with him.
Can you describe for me what that meeting was like? Was it a private meeting? What did you talk about?
Well, I don't want to go into all of the details, but he was apologetic that he was unable to come to the conference last night where we were originally going to meet because of complications regarding his trip to Greece. But I just conveyed to him my admiration for the extraordinary work that he is doing in raising some of the most important issues facing our planet and the billions of people on our planet, injecting the issue of the need for morality in a global economy where we have the top 1% now owning more wealth than the bottom 99%, where we are moving in a suicidal direction in terms of climate change. He has been upfront on that. His words are going well beyond the Catholic Church to to, I think, the entire world's community, and that's just something extraordinary.
So what was it like to meet him in the flesh? What's he like personally?
He's a beautiful man. He really is. There's a radiance. I don't mean to overdo this. I'm not a Catholic, but he is a beautiful man, and there's a radiance that comes from him. It was a very wonderful moment.